radios or phonographs, before there were steam engines and jackhammers, there was bitter Twitter berry pie. But I've gotten ahead of myself because the pie actually comes at the end of the story. Here's what happened at the beginning. A brother and a sister went to their mother and asked her to make them a bitter Twitter berry pie. She told the twins, for twins they were that this year, they were old enough to go out and pick their own bitter Twitter berries themselves. She gave each a pocket full of cheese and bread, a large basket, and an ocarina. Off you go then, she said with these words of advice. To find the Twitter bitter berries, just listen for the calls of the Twitter bitter berry birds. When they call to you, you should call back to them.
Not yet?
On your ocarina. Not yet. Not yet.
We're ready. We're so ready.
You'll know. You'll know when the birds show up.
School kids can do this.
Now, the bitterberry Twitter birds are fierce little creatures. They may sing out wildly to you, but if you play their own song back to them tenderly enough, they'll know that you're their friends and they'll lead you to the bitterberry bushes. Now you take care of your brother, and you take care of your sister, and we'll all have pie tonight, she said, and she sent them out the door. The twins walked out of the village together, listening carefully for the bitterberry Twitter birds. And a while later, they heard a sound so soft that they couldn't tell what it was. Let's hear a sound so soft we don't even know what it is. When the twins stood still and listened, they realized it was the sound of the softest breeze through the trees, through the leaves. Soft sound. They began walking again and heard the sound getting louder as the wind started to pick up with gusts and twirls in the air that tugged at their clothes and at the very trees around them. And then it blew away. Then it blew away. Wind blew away. The twins walked on, listening for the bitterberry Twitter birds. Instead, they heard someone calling them, asking, who? Who? Let's hear who? Then they heard many voices saying, who? When the twins did not answer, the hoot owls asked again wildly, wild owls. So the twins called back to them gently. I'm going to be the twins. And the owls called back wildly. So the twins called back again. And the owls knew they were their friends and called back gently. Gentle owls. And the twins went on their way. They walked quite a ways listening before they heard the sweet, twisting, wild song of a bitterberry Twitter bird. It was just one of them. It was that bitterberry bird right there. One wild bitterberry bird. The twins did their best to call out just as beautifully, but not so wildly. And the bitterberry bird and the twins spoke back and forth until they knew they were their friends. The Twitter bird headed back to its bitterberry bushes. Enchanted by the songs the twins still played, the Twitter birds flitted from branch to branch, stopping to listen. This helped the twins keep up as they followed the Twitter bird through the woods. Soon, they heard many Twitter birds, just as wild as the first had been. Let's hear your best wild Twitter. Just as beautifully. But the bitter Twitter berry birds were still until they knew they were their friends.
Yeah?
Yeah, soon. Oh, okay.
Yeah?
By the time the twins reached the flock of twitterberry birds on their bitterberry bushes, they had indeed become friends, and no one had to fly away. They could all just settle down to collecting the abundant bitter berries. There were so many bitter berries, and it had taken so long for them to find them, that darkness was falling by the time the twins headed back home. It was then that they heard the howl of wolves. The twins called back. They were a little nervous. It's a terrible wolf cry. But the wolves were still just as wild. And the wolves called back and forth to each other till they knew they were friends. Even though the wolves might want to become close friends, the twins still began to run, still calling back and forth with the wolves till they faded in the distance.
That's right, that's right.
They ran back through the curious hoot owls. Here come the hoot owls again. Running. So they hear them in the distance and it's kind of quiet. Then they get closer and it's a little louder. And they're right in the middle of all the hoot owls. And they run on past till the sound of the hoot owls faded away. By the time they neared their village, it was well and truly dark. Catching their breath, hands on their knees, listening carefully, out of habit now at least. It was then they heard the people of the village calling out to them, wild and hopeful with their voices. The happy village people welcoming the children back.
Where in the world have you kids been?
Oh, the happy sounds of the village, nice. And the twins called back, happy to hear them. And the twins made it back tired and grateful. And the very next day, everyone had a very tasty piece of bitter twitterberry pie. And that, as I promised, is the end of our story. Great. What time is it? I got 15 minutes.
Can we get the music?